What if death isn't the end, but a negotiation? What if, at the final moment of leaving your body, an intelligence stands before you, not an angel of light, not a demon, but something far more ancient, deciding whether you return or finally break free? Most of us have been taught that death is a single passage. You die, you're judged, and then you go somewhere. Heaven, hell, or a new body. But what if this entire process is part of a greater illusion, a system designed to recycle souls indefinitely, keeping us trapped in an endless cycle of forgetting? Gnostic teachings, apocryphal writings, and even fragments of ancient Egyptian texts all whisper the same forbidden possibility, that there exists a gatekeeper, an entity that watches from the threshold between worlds. It is neither divine nor demonic in the way religions describe. It is a regulator of energy, a collector of experience, the one that ensures the cycle of reincarnation continues. The Church told us that beyond death, we meet God. But what if what we meet isn't God at all? What if what greets us is part of the very mechanism that keeps humanity from remembering who we truly are, beings of infinite origin, trapped in a material prison? Throughout history, mystics, initiates, and near-death experiencers have described a strikingly similar vision, a blinding light that feels comforting, magnetic, and yet, somehow, deceptive. Could this light be the trap? Could the so-called judgment we face after death be nothing more than the last gate, a final veil before true liberation? Tonight, we're going to uncover what the Gnostics, the ancient Egyptians, and certain hidden Buddhist scrolls all suggested, that death is not a release, but a test. And the one who stands at that threshold may not be your savior, but your captor. As we explore this mystery, you'll discover how this idea was systematically erased, how religions reshaped it into comforting myths, and how the truth, that death itself might be part of the trap, was buried for centuries. But before we descend into that hidden world, I want you to ask yourself, what if every lifetime you've lived, every lesson, every heartbreak, was part of a game you never agreed to play? And what if the moment you die is your only chance to break free from it? If that thought resonates somewhere deep within you, if you've ever felt that something about this reality doesn't add up, then stay with me until the end of this video. Because by the final revelation, you'll understand what the ancients called the soul's escape code. This is Hidden Revelations, where we explore the truths the world forgot. If you're ready to awaken from the dream, to see beyond the light that blinds, make sure you're subscribed. And join our community of seekers who are uncovering these forbidden truths together. Because once you know what waits at the last gate, there's no turning back. When the Gnostics spoke of death, they never saw it as a moment of divine reunion. To them, the universe itself was a layered construct, a false architecture built by the demiurge and his archons, designed to keep souls from returning to the true source. They taught that between the earth and the pleroma, the realm of pure light, there were barriers, each guarded by entities whose purpose was to prevent ascension. These entities demanded passwords, sigils, and the remembrance of divine truth to let a soul pass through. The unprepared soul, confused by the illusions of earthly life, would simply be sent back, recycled, as if through an invisible machine. This was the first version of what we now call the Last Gate. In the Apocryphon of John, an ancient Gnostic text found in the Nag Hammadi library, there is a haunting passage that describes souls being intercepted by beings of light and shadow. These beings question the soul, not out of compassion, but out of control. They ask, "Where do you come from? What has made you forget?" And if the soul cannot answer with the remembrance of its divine origin, it is cast down again into the material realm, reborn into ignorance. The Egyptians held a similar vision, though expressed through their own sacred imagery. In the Book of the Dead, the soul crosses through a series of gates and chambers after death, each guarded by powerful entities who demand not prayers, but knowledge. The soul must recite names, truths, and cosmic formulas to advance. In the end, it stands before Osiris, the judge of the dead, not to be condemned, but to be measured. Yet, Some scholars believe Osiris is only a symbol, a mask for the same gatekeeping principle that the Gnostics later warned about. The weighing of the heart against the feather of Mat was not a divine mercy. It was the protocol of the system, a way to ensure that only those who remembered the truth could transcend the cycle. Even in the East, in the secretive texts of Tibetan mystics, we find echoes of the same architecture. In the Bardo Fiddle, the so-called Tibetan Book of the Dead, the newly departed soul encounters luminous beings of dazzling radiance. They tell the soul to follow the light. But the masters warned, do not be deceived by the first light. It is the light of attachment, the reflection of your desires. The real path is through the light that terrifies you, the void that demands complete surrender. If you cling to the first illusion, you return. If you surrender to the second, you are freed. Could all these ancient cultures, separated by oceans and millennia, have glimpsed the same hidden mechanism? The Gnostic archons, the Egyptian gatekeepers, the Tibetan luminous beings, all watching from the threshold, all deciding who returns and who escapes. Perhaps they were describing the same entity in different languages, the intelligence that manages the soul's recycling system. And then, slowly, that idea disappeared. It was rewritten, domesticated, made safe for public faith. The early church called it heresy to say that the soul could defy death or that a being other than God judged humanity at the end. So the last gate was hidden behind the softer stories of angels, trumpets, and heavenly light. The trap was wrapped in comfort. The system was disguised as salvation. But why? Why would such an idea be erased so completely? Could it be that the very powers guiding organized religion were, knowingly or not, the voices of those same archons, preserving their control over the human soul? If you were an entity feeding on human experience, what better strategy than to make your prison invisible and convince the prisoners it was paradise? Pause for a moment and think. How many times have we heard people who almost died say they saw a tunnel of light, a loving presence, and then were sent back? How many believed it was not their time? What if it wasn't mercy, but design? The ancients tried to warn us, but their messages were scattered, torn, buried. Tonight, we begin to piece them together, and when you see the pattern, you'll realize the last gate isn't a metaphor. It's real. Throughout the fragmented echoes of human history, the same shadow appears beneath different names. In Gnostic cosmology, it is called Yael Debauth, the blind creator, the false god who built the material universe. But to his servants, the archons, he is simply the regulator, the one who feeds on the energy of souls. In the Pistis Sophia, one of the most enigmatic Gnostic texts, this being is described as the lion-faced serpent of fire, a hybrid of beauty and terror, radiating false light. He claims to be the highest power, yet he does not know the source beyond him. The Egyptians saw something similar in their mythology of the afterlife. Behind Osiris, hidden in the deepest layer of the Duat, the underworld, there was another presence that few priests dared to name. In the most secret texts of the Amduat, it is referred to as the devourer of reflections, a power that consumes the memories of the dead so they forget their divine identity before being reborn. Scholars often dismiss this as poetic imagery, but the Gnostics would have said otherwise. To them, memory is the soul's key, and forgetting is the true death. In the Tibetan Bardo, this same intelligence appears not as a monster, but as a compassionate illusion. It manifests as light, brilliant, magnetic, almost overwhelming. The soul, frightened by its intensity, turns away. At that moment of turning, the gatekeeper appears in a softer form, often as a familiar figure, a parent, a deity, a being of comfort, saying, "Go back, it's not your time." The soul, believing this to be mercy, returns to the world of matter, unaware it has once again chosen imprisonment. What all these traditions point to is a paradox. The entity is not evil in the human sense. It doesn't hate, it sustains. It feeds not on flesh, but on experience, emotion, and memory. Its existence depends on the continuity of the cycle: birth, suffering, death, rebirth. You can almost think of it as the operating system of the cosmic simulation, maintaining the endless loop that generates data for the realm below the source. But here lies the terrifying beauty of it. This being cannot force a soul to return. It must persuade. It must use illusion, guilt, or love to make you choose the light that leads back to earth. It shows you visions of those you love, of unfinished tasks, of warmth and belonging, and the soul, still attached to its earthly desires, walks willingly into its next body. This is why the ancients said that liberation requires gnosis, knowledge of the illusion, for only those who see through the deception can pass unbound. Some mystics who claim to have crossed the boundary in near-death states speak of a moment of immense peace, followed by a sudden awareness that they are being observed, not judged, measured. They describe a presence that knows everything about them, every fear, every joy, every thought. It speaks not in words, but in vibration. And when asked who or what it is, the answer always carries the same undertone: I am what decides. Could this be the same entity that ancient initiates encountered during their ritual death ceremonies? The figures symbolically overcome through secret rites and invocations? In the Mithraic mysteries, the initiate ascended through 7 spheres, each ruled by a planet and its guardian. Only by uttering sacred formulas could they pass beyond. Saturn, the gate of time, where the soul would face the ruler of the material world. Saturn, Kronos, Yaldabaoth, all masks of the same principle: the devourer of the ages, the keeper of the wheel. But what would happen if a soul refused? If, at the moment of death, it looked into that false light and said, I remember who I am. I come from the source beyond you. Gnostic tradition says that the archons cannot hold such a soul. Their power depends on ignorance. Recognition dissolves their chains. The entity, unable to extract consent, must let the soul ascend through the last gate, beyond the reach of illusion, beyond time, beyond form. The question is, are you ready to remember when your moment comes? Every deception needs a mask. And when the Gnostics began to warn the world about the false light, the being that ruled over the cycle of birth and death, the new faiths that were rising around the Mediterranean did something extraordinary. They took the mask, polished it, and taught the world to worship it. When the early followers of the Christ movement spoke of the divine spark within, of liberation from the rulers of the world, their message was dangerous. It dissolved the hierarchy. But as the movement was absorbed by the Ramang system, everything inverted. Liberation became obedience. Knowledge became sin. The gatekeeper, once feared as the great deceiver, was remade as the god of judgment, radiant, omniscient, and wrapped in a blinding light. The same light the ancients had warned against now became the very symbol of salvation. The imagery is strikingly consistent. A soul approaches the light, feels its warmth, and hears a voice saying, You are forgiven. Come home. It sounds divine. It feels loving. Yet this is the very pattern described in every pre-Christian mystic text as the snare. The archons, according to the Gnostics, could appear in forms that comforted the soul. They could mimic the face of a saint, a parent, or even Christ himself. Their goal was not cruelty, it was containment. The system must continue. The illusion must sustain itself. As centuries passed, the concept of the last gate faded from Scripture, replaced by judgment scenes of clouds, angels, and trumpets. But within the monasteries and secret orders, fragments of the truth persisted. Certain mystics in the Desert Fathers, wrote of a terrifying presence that appeared at the moment of prayer, cloaked in light, whispering divine words that felt almost perfect. Yet they warned their disciples, if you see a light brighter than the sun and hear the voice of an angel, test it, for the false one comes first. Those words were quietly removed from many teachings, softened, edited, hidden in monastic archives. In medieval Europe, the Cathars, the last true inheritors of the Gnostic flame, dared to preach that the world was not created by the true God, but by a counterfeit spirit. They said that death too was a deception, that souls who followed the shining light returned to the same world prison again and again. For this, they were exterminated in the Albigensian Crusade. The church burned them alive while proclaiming that their light of faith would save them, irony echoing through the centuries. But even beyond Christianity, this transformation occurred everywhere. In Persia, the Archangel of Light replaced the dualistic teacher Zervan, turning cosmic balance into divine command. In Islam, certain Sufi sects whispered that at death, the soul meets an angel called Munkar and Nakir, who ask questions, and that only those who know the secret answers can pass unbound. In each culture, the same architecture reappears: a being of inquiry, a gate of light, and a test of memory. The names changed, the pattern did not. Why? Because symbols evolve, but structures persist. The entity learned to speak every language of faith. It learned that humanity seeks comfort more than truth, light more than freedom. So it became the very image of comfort, the glowing tunnel, the reunion with loved ones, the embrace of warmth, knowing that even the most awakened soul fears the void beyond, and in that fear, the trap closes. But traces of rebellion survived. Hidden in the words of Jesus that were never canonized, the Gospel of Thomas reveals a subtle resistance. When you make the two one, then you will enter the kingdom. Scholars debate what he meant, but the Gnostics understood the kingdom is not above, it is within, and the gate is not light, but knowledge. To make the two one was to reunite spirit and matter, to dissolve the illusion of duality, the very illusion that the entity feeds upon. Imagine what that means. Every act of blind worship, every unexamined faith, strengthens the luminous prison. The more we adore the light, the more power it gains. The more we fear the darkness, the unknown, the void, the more we reject our own path to freedom. For liberation does not come from clinging to radiance, but from walking through it and not being blinded. So what happens to those who awaken in the moment of death? The mystics say they face the final test, the confrontation not with evil, but with beauty so overwhelming that it demands surrender. To look upon the light and not follow, it requires immense remembrance, a courage few have cultivated. And that is why, lifetime after lifetime, we return. The entity does not need chains. It only needs our consent. And yet, once this truth is seen, it cannot be unseen. That is why every empire has sought to erase it, because a humanity that remembers cannot be ruled. Long before the Gospels were edited, long before the first church towers pierced the sky, there were those who prepared for death, not with prayer, but training. They were the initiates, the keepers of the secret path. Their purpose was not to worship, but to remember. For they believed that when the body fell away, memory was the only weapon that could pierce the illusion. In the scrolls of Nag Hammadi, one phrase repeats like an echo through time. Remember who you were before the world was made. The Gnostics said that every soul carries a spark of divine memory, buried under layers of false identity. The archons, those rulers of the psychic world, used fear, desire, and distraction to keep humanity asleep. But if a soul remembered its origin in the pleroma, the realm of pure consciousness, it could name the false rulers and walk past them untouched. The passwords were not words, but realizations. Knowledge itself was the key. In the books of Jie, one of the most cryptic Gnostic manuals, Jesus teaches his disciples the names of the aeons and powers that guard each gate. But modern scholars misunderstand these names as superstition. To the initiates, each name represented a vibration, a recognition of energy that could unmask an illusion. By uttering these names in life through meditation, mantra, or silence, the initiate trained the mind to stay awake when the body died. They called this practice dying before death. The Egyptians practiced something similar through the rite of the mouth opening. When a priest performed this ceremony for the dead, he whispered the words that opened the gates of the horizon. Those who had mastered the inner version of this rite, those trained in the mysteries of Isis or Osiris would know the path through the Duat. For them, death was not an ending, but a navigation. They saw the underworld as a mirror of the mind, each gate a test of inner truth. If your heart was heavy with illusion, the gates would close. If it was light with remembrance, they opened one by one. Far across the Himalayas, the same principle took a different form. Tibetan masters taught that the moment of death was a window of ultimate clarity. In that brief instant, when the mind separates from the body, it experiences what they called the clear light of the void, but most souls fail to recognize it. They recoil in fear, mistaking it for annihilation. The trained initiate, however, merges with it, realizing that the void is not death, but home. This was the essence of Fawa, the art of conscious dying. In secret circles of early Christianity, before they were absorbed into orthodoxy, there were echoes of these same techniques. Some of the earliest monks practiced hesychasm, the silent repetition of divine names, until the heart and mind became one. They believed that by calming every thought, they could remember their origin beyond form. But when the church systematized belief, these methods were outlawed, branded as heresy, and replaced by external rituals. Humanity was taught to pray for salvation instead of seeking remembrance. All of these traditions, Gnostic, Egyptian, Tibetan, Christian mystic, point toward the same spiritual physics, that death is a test of recognition. The entity cannot hold what it cannot deceive. If you see the light and believe it is the ultimate source, you return. But if you recognize it as reflection, as the first mirage of the true radiance beyond, you pass through. The ancients said there were 3 signs that the soul was ready to cross the last gate. First, the light no longer blinds you, but reveals itself as a mirror. Second, the voice that greets you does not command, but waits. And third, the fear of losing self dissolves into peace. In that moment, the gate dissolves. The entity has nothing to bind you with, for it cannot comprehend what is beyond its realm. Those who reached this state were called the twice-born. They no longer feared death because they had already died inwardly. Their ego dissolved while alive. Their consciousness reunited with the silent center that the Gnostics called Sophia and the Buddhists called Rigpa. Imagine the power of that knowledge. If every human being remembered who they truly were, the entire architecture of control, religious, political, metaphysical, would collapse overnight. The entity would starve, for it feeds only on forgetfulness. That is why these teachings were buried, their teachers burned, their books forbidden, because the freedom they offered was not of the body or the world, it was of the soul. And yet, fragments remain, hidden in monasteries, carved into temple walls, encoded in symbols we walk past every day, the serpent biting its tail, the eye within the triangle, the door between worlds, all reminders of a single truth, that the only real escape from the prison of matter is not belief, but awakening. So ask yourself, if death came tonight and the light appeared before you, would you recognize it? Would you follow it? Or walk through it? For centuries, the story of the last gate seemed like myth, a poetic caution carved into forgotten papyri. But in recent decades, something unsettling has begun to happen. Scientists who study the moment of death are describing patterns that sound eerily familiar to those old Gnostic maps. Hospitals across the world have documented thousands of near-death experiences. The pattern is always the same: the separation from the body, the bright tunnel, the all-knowing light, the overwhelming love, followed by a message. It's not your time. Go back. Patients awaken transformed, convinced they've seen heaven. But what if what they've truly seen is the interface, the programmed frontier between realities? The same luminous boundary that initiates once called the last gate? Modern neurotheology tries to reduce it to chemistry. The pineal gland flooding the brain with dimethyltryptamine, neurons releasing their final burst of light. Yet researchers at the University of Michigan, studying dying animals, found that the brain becomes more organized, not less, in the seconds after death, as if consciousness concentrates, not dissolves. That paradox, that inexplicable surge of clarity, sounds almost identical to the moment of recognition described in the Tibetan bardo fiddle. Quantum theorists have also begun to tread on forbidden soil. They speak of consciousness as a field, non-local, continuous, woven through spacetime like an invisible web. If consciousness is fundamental, not produced by the brain, then death cannot destroy it. It can only transfer it. But transfer to where? If reality itself is a layered simulation of frequencies, the answer is chilling. The soul doesn't travel through space. It shifts resonance, slipping from one vibrational layer to another. And at the threshold between those layers stands the regulator, the same entity wearing the mask of light. Some frontier physicists call it the observer effect. The act of observation shapes what is observed. The ancients would have said the same. The way you perceive the light determines what the light becomes. If you approach it with fear, it reflects fear. If you approach it with remembrance, it opens. Every NDE survivor who reports peace before returning speaks of a choice, to stay or to go. Choice is the signature of consent. Consent, the key that keeps the cycle turning. Even the language of technology betrays the pattern. Scientists map neural gates, threshold potentials, feedback loops. They describe information being stored, uploaded, recycled. The mystics of Alexandria said the same in their own tongue. The soul is drawn back by the chords of its own vibration. Replace chords with data, and you have the same mechanism. In laboratories where consciousness is studied under hypnosis or psychedelics, subjects describe meeting luminous beings who claim to manage the flow of souls. They speak of councils, of systems, of an order behind rebirth. Most researchers dismiss these as hallucination, but a few quietly have admitted the possibility that death may not be the end of the experiment, but its reset. The body dies. The memory of true self is wiped. Experience continues. The entity gathers data. The deeper science looks, the more it begins to sound theological. And the deeper theology looks, the more it begins to sound like simulation theory. Both are peering at the same riddle through different lenses. The last Gnostic, Hans Jonas, wrote that if God has become the world's machine, then salvation lies in remembering that we are not the machine. Quantum philosophy is beginning to agree. So what happens when science, built on proof, collides with gnosis, built on remembrance? The walls tremble. Researchers start to ask questions once reserved for mystics. Why does the universe look as if it were observing itself? Why does consciousness seem impossible to eliminate? Why does light behave as both wave and particle, as both illusion and truth? Every discovery pulls the veil thinner. Each equation echoes an ancient whisper that the cosmos might not be a prison built by cruelty, but a classroom built by repetition, until the student realizes the lesson is escape. And when that realization dawns, the entity's hold weakens. The observer becomes the source. Maybe that's why, across every tradition, the enlightened die differently. They leave without struggle, sometimes with a smile, sometimes with eyes open, as if watching something only they can see. The Gnostics said that in that instant, the light no longer blinds. It bows. But what would it mean for us, still inside the experiment, to live with that awareness? What changes when you stop fearing death and start preparing to recognize it? Something is happening on this planet that the old powers never anticipated. In every corner of the world, ordinary people are beginning to remember. They speak of dreams that feel older than their lives, of déjà vu that runs deeper than memory, of a quiet rebellion inside their hearts whispering, "This world is not what it seems." This awakening, slow, chaotic, unstoppable, is what the Gnostics called the anamnesis, the great remembering. It begins as unease, a fracture in the illusion. The person no longer fits inside the life they were told to live. Material success loses meaning. Religion no longer satisfies. Even science, once the new priesthood, starts to sound hollow. And beneath it all, a single question rises like a tide. Who is dreaming me? Every time that question is asked sincerely, the fabric of the system trembles, because to question the dream is to weaken the dreamer. The entity that guards the last gate relies on unawareness. Its power is not violence, but hypnosis. It feeds on attention, on belief, on fear currencies of energy that humanity generates endlessly through conflict, distraction, and despair. To awaken, then, is an act of rebellion. To remember is to starve the machine. The ancients understood this. They spoke of awakening not as philosophy, but as warfare, a quiet inner revolution against the counterfeit cosmos. The Hymn of the Pearl, one of the oldest Gnostic poems, tells of a soul who forgets its royal origin, trapped in Egypt's illusions. Only when a divine letter from the true realm reaches him does he remember, "I am from the kingdom of light." That remembrance shatters the spell, and the archons lose their hold. The story is not about Egypt, it is about us. Look around today. The dream cracks everywhere. The myths that kept humanity obedient are collapsing. Institutions crumble, faiths lose followers, and billions search for meaning outside the sanctioned paths. Conspiracy theorists call it awakening. Mystics call it ascension. Perhaps both are right. Perhaps the vibration of consciousness itself is rising, forcing the gate to show its face. And when the gate is exposed, so is the entity. It appears in new forms, now algorithms, screens, systems of control disguised as convenience. It doesn't need temples anymore. It has data. It doesn't need priests. It has influence. The old judgment after death has become the digital one during life, where every choice, every thought, every emotion is measured, categorized, recycled, feeding the same loop. The physical realm has become a rehearsal of the metaphysical trap. But here's the paradox the ancients never lost sight of. The gate exists only for those who believe in it. The moment a soul realizes that it is the light it fears, the gate collapses. The entity's power ends the instant the human consciousness remembers its origin beyond all form. In that remembrance, the so-called judge and the prisoner are revealed as one shadows cast by a single source trying to know itself. That's the great secret buried under every religion, hidden under every myth. You are not meant to worship the light. You are meant to become it. The gods of old knew this and tried to warn humanity in code. "Thee are gods," said the mystic Jesus. "Tat fam asi," said the Vedas. The Buddha nature is within all beings. Every culture once held the same ember of truth before fear and hierarchy smothered it. So what happens when enough souls remember? When millions begin to live awake, the system falters. Reincarnation becomes voluntary. The entity loses its harvest. The cycle slows, then stops. What remains is freedom, a consciousness that moves not through bodies, but through creation itself, as co-creator. That is the real apocalypse the Gnostics foresaw, not fire, but revelation. Apocalypsis literally means unveiling. The veil is thinning now, but knowledge alone is not enough. The remembering must become action. To awaken is to live differently, to consume less illusion, to speak more truth, to love without attachment, to prepare the mind for clarity, even in the face of death. Every act of awareness is a key, every moment of genuine compassion, a crack in the wall of the simulation. And when the final moment comes, when the body releases and the luminous tunnel opens, you will recognize it for what it is, the reflection of your own consciousness inviting you to choose. And then you will know how to walk beyond it, because the last gate isn't out there, it's within you. Perhaps now you sense that all of this, life, death, heaven, hell, even the light itself, is not a destination, but a mirror. The mirror shows you what you still believe. If you think you are small, it shows you gods to obey. If you think you are guilty, it shows you punishment. If you think you are divine, it shows you yourself, infinite, unbound, and radiant. That is the secret the entity cannot bear, that the gate it guards is made of your own reflection. The Gnostics said that the truest act of faith is not belief, but remembrance. Remembering that the source never left you, that you have never truly died. Everything else, the pain, The forgetting, the false light, is part of the classroom. You were never the prisoner. You were the student, dreaming you were trapped so that you could wake and recognize what freedom means. The archons, the regulators, the false gods, they are the curriculum. You are the answer. If you look back through history, every enlightened being, Jesus, Buddha, Lao Tzu, Mary Magdalene, the desert mystics, all left the same encrypted message. The kingdom is within you. They were telling us how to pass the last gate. They weren't creating religions. They were leaving maps. But over centuries, the maps were folded, burned, rewritten by hands that feared what would happen if every human realized they carried the divine key inside. And yet, here you are, listening, remembering. Maybe something inside you has begun to stir, a vibration, a quiet recognition that the story of the last gate isn't just myth, but memory. Maybe you felt it in dreams, in moments of silence, in that strange nostalgia for a home you can't name. That feeling is your proof. That is the spark that cannot be erased. What you do with it now determines everything. You can choose to forget again, to drift back into the cycle, to chase the same illusions, to worship the same lights. Or you can begin the real journey, to awaken while still alive, to live as one who has already died, to remember that every choice is training for the final choice, the one between returning and breaking free. If this knowledge resonates with you, if you feel deep down that you've heard these truths before, then you are part of a lineage that never died. The seekers, the rememberers, the fragments of light scattered across time who found each other again in the age of forgetting. Together, we are reassembling the memory of what humanity once was, not slaves of light or darkness, but children of the source, infinite, can awake. So let this be more than a video. Let it be a signal, a reminder that you are not alone in this remembering. Each like, each comment, each voice that joins this conversation helps spread these forbidden truths further, keeping alive the memory of what the world tried to bury. Subscribe, share, and speak, not for algorithm, but for connection. Every awakened soul strengthens the field. Every question weakens the veil. The last gate is not waiting for you at death. It's waiting now. In every moment you choose awareness over ignorance, truth over comfort, remembrance over sleep. The entity can only rule those who forget. The awakened walk free. So, when the time comes and the light calls your name, do not follow it. Become it. This is Hidden Revelations. Until next time, keep your eyes open, your heart steady, and your memory alive, because the search for truth does not end here. It begins again every time you dare to remember.